Hello and welcome back to All Biblical Apologetics. The last episode should have come out 2 weeks ago, unless I procrastinate again and wait like 2 months to come out with this video finally. Yeah, so sorry about that. But anyway, this is All Biblical Apologetics, where I read the Bible in order, reading every single detail. I'm reading the KJV. And I'm also adding my thoughts in, just notes that I've taken as I've been reading, so you can see my sort of insights. I hope I give you some thoughts that you hadn't considered before, some sort of insight. And anyway, I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to start where I left off last time, in All Biblical Apologetics episode 1. If you haven't watched that, you can go watch that if you want. But anyway, on episode 2, I'm starting at Genesis chapter 4. I read Genesis chapter 1 through 3 in episode 1. So I'll start here. Cain and Abel. Genesis chapter 4. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So I had a note here that says, lots of shepherds favorable to God in the Bible. So in the Bible, there's lots of metaphors around shepherds. And it seems that shepherds, like Jesus said he was the good shepherd, and David was a shepherd. And many of the prophets were shepherds, the major and minor prophets. And so it seems like God is very favorable to shepherds. And we can't really see what that means until we look at the story of Jesus and how Jesus said he's the good shepherd. And it's sort of like the metaphor of him going up to Peter and saying, we'll make you a fisher of men instead of a fisher of fish. His metaphor with the good shepherd is sort of like that. He is a shepherd of men rather than a shepherd of fish. Or, not fish. What am I talking about? A shepherd of sheep. Jesus is the shepherd of men. So Jesus brings men to him. He watches over us, and like he says, he leaves the 99 to find the one. So it's a metaphor for how we are in the world in comparison to God, how we apply to God. And God will come after us and rescue us and try to find us again if we are lost. So we are the sheep, and we can see here that God really loves shepherds because they are a metaphor of his love for humanity. And so we see this in Genesis with Abel. He was a keeper of sheep. So we can see, based on that metaphor, that Abel is favorable to God. Now I'll continue in verse 3. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit of the ground an offering to the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But Cain and to his offering he had not respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So I put a note here, and if I'm remembering correctly, I wrote this note a little while ago. I got this from my pastor's preaching about what was the difference between their two offerings, because Cain and Abel both brought an offering to God. And so what I wrote is that Abel brought the first of his flocks, and Cain thought of God as an afterthought. So it says Cain brought the fruit of the ground, an offering to the Lord, and Abel he also brought the firstlings of his flock. So Cain brought the fruit of the ground, he brought an offering to the Lord, and Abel brought the first fruits of his flock. So he brought what was most important to him, because what was important to God is that we make him an important part of our lives, and we offer him the most valuable time to us. We offer him the most valuable efforts to him. We offer him the most valuable parts of our life to him, instead of just thinking of him as an afterthought. He is not a part of our lives. I suppose we could say we are a part of God's life, instead of God is a part of our life. God is not simply a footnote in our lives. We are a footnote in all of creation and all of history, and he chose to die for us anyway, even though we were just a footnote. Anyway, and that's not to say that we don't matter. It isn't very important, but it's only important because God chose us to be important. Does that make sense? So anyway, Cain thought of God as an afterthought. Abel brought the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Abel murdered. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field, and Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? And the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. The curse of Cain. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield to thee her strength. And a fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be on the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out of this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone findeth me, and shall slay me. And the Lord said to him, Therefore whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So I put a note here. Once again, we see the theme of God giving grace even to those who sin greatly. So, last episode, I put a note, here, I'll flip to it really quickly. I put a note at the fall of man in verse 20 that, And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Unto Adam also, and to his wife, did the Lord God make coats of skins, and clothed them. So this is after they sinned, after they committed the original sin, and after they fell away from God's graces, and after they ate the apple. So after all this, God was not very favorable toward Adam and Eve, and yet he still gave them coats of skins. So he's giving them grace in this time where they've been brought low and humbled, where they've been where they exalted themselves by eating the fruit and gave themselves the knowledge of good and evil, and yet God, even though they sinned, still has favor for them because he loves them, because he created them. And so because of all this, he gives them coats of skins, and he tells them, he gives them warmth, he gives them a gift, even though they just fell out of favor with him, even though they just sinned against him, even though they just caused all of humanity to fall. And we can see the same thing with Cain here. He says, And the Lord said unto him, Therefore whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So God's giving grace, even to those who sin greatly. He punishes Cain, but he also gives him a mark. He also gives them this mark that shows mercy to him, because if anyone kills Cain, then he will be punished sevenfold. So the Lord God gave Cain a gift, even after he had murdered his brother and committed this grave sin. He gave him a gift of this mark that doesn't essentially allows him to not be killed, because anyone who kills him will be punished greatly. So anyway, all this to say, God is God is graceful. He gives us grace even when we sin, even when we commit a grave sin like murder. God can still show grace to us through all of that because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. Cain dwells in the land of Nod. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Enoch. And he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael bat Methusael, and Methusael bat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. And Adah bare Jabal, and he was the father such as dwell in tents, and of such have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such handle the harp and organ. And Zillah, she bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificier in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 times 7-fold. The birth of Seth. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. So, here I wrote, parallel to Job. So, Adam and Eve had another child. They had Seth. Parallel to Job, because Job lost his whole family. Job lost his wife and his kids. If I'm remembering correctly, it was in a hurricane. No, it was bandits. Maybe both. I don't remember. I haven't read Job in a while. I began reading Job, and I never finished it. Job lost his whole family, and when all seemed lost, God gave Job a new family. And so Job thought he was destined for that old family. Job thought that it was God's plan for him to bring about all of his generations and all of his people through his children. And just like God's promise to Abraham and to Adam and Eve and to Cain, just like all of these things in Noah, God gave them dominion over the world so that they may have children and build a functional society and stuff. So anyway, all that to say, Adam and Eve parallel to Job because Job was wrong. God seemingly did something bad in his life by taking all this stuff away, and not only through this did he essentially conquer Satan, he proved the accuser wrong. He also gave Job everything back and more. So he rewarded Job for his difficult circumstance and his hard work through all this and his faithfulness to God through all this. And so all of this is a parallel, and then it must be important in our lives. We must remain faithful to God even though we're going through hard things. And so Adam and Eve lost their child, and they remained faithful to God, and they bore another child. And this child, it says, I believe in the next verse, to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So, essentially, Adam and Eve bore Seth, and Seth began the line of Israel, essentially, which was what God made the Old Covenant with. So people who began to call upon the name of the Lord. So what does that mean? That means that at this beginning time, Cain took away Abel, and so Seth was born in his place, and through that, which seemed like a bad thing to happen, more people who would call upon the name of the Lord. So essentially we wouldn't have Jews and in turn Christians today if it wasn't for the death of Abel. And so it's all part of God's plan. It wasn't for the death of Abel and the replacement of Abel with Seth. So it's all part of God's plan. And even things that seem to be bad bring good about in the world. So anyway, back to the text. And it goes on to say, Adam's descendants, Genesis chapter 5. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God he made him. Male and female he created them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, in the day where they were created. So, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Male and female he created them, because it's used to argue against homosexuality as well as transgenderism. Lots of people use this verse in modernity. Male and female he created them. I think, honestly, that's a pretty good argument, but a better argument is the verse right before it. In the image of God he created them. So what does that mean? The image of God. God is steadfast. God is unchanging. God is, of course, we're in the image of God, created in the image of God, so we're not perfect, but our job is to reflect God's goodness and God's attributes and God's traits. So we are to be as much like God as we can possibly achieve. So all of these things, his goodness, his faithfulness, his kindness, his grace, all of these things we're called to reflect, but also his steadfastness. So we're to remain unchanging. We're to remain faithful to what he's called us to be. If he's called us to be male and female, he created them. If he's called us to be created in his image, then we shall not go on sinning. And therefore, these other verses, they say, like Romans 1 or Leviticus 18:22, talks about homosexuality. So we can see all over the Bible. And I believe there's another epistle that talks about it. I don't think it's Romans. I can't remember off the top of my head, though. But anyway, so we see all over the Bible these examples of God calling us away from things like that. And we can see in Genesis 5 that he calls us to be made in the image of God. So he calls us to be as much like him as we can. And that includes avoiding sin, being steadfast, being kind and good and faithful. So all of these things, I believe, include not doing perverted sexual acts. Yeah. So, anyway, that a tougher subject, but it needed to be said. Back to the text. And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and he called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years, and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enos lived 90 years, and he begat Canaan. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. Canaan's descendants. And Canaan lived 70 years, and he begat Mahalaleel. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalaleel 840 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalaleel lived 65 years, and begat Jared. And Mahalaleel lived after he begat Jared 830 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalaleel were 895 years, and he died. And Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and he begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So that's pretty weird. What does that mean? That is not, it's unlike any of the other, see, these chapters they're laid out like in this format. This person lived blank amount of years, then begat this son, then lived blank amount of years after that, and then died. So they're all laid out in this formula except Enoch's descendants. It says Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And then it says all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Doesn't say he died. So that's weird. I think that's a reference to the book of Enoch. But it could also be the other way around, where Enoch references that verse because that verse was talking about Enoch in this special way, and it's seeming to imply that Enoch was different from everyone else because he was more faithful to God. So, I'm not an expert on the book of Enoch. What I do know is that it's apocryphal, so we don't know too much about the history of the book of Enoch. If it is true, which I don't know, and the fact that it's apocryphal, most apocrypha books are apocrypha for a reason. So I would be wary of it, and I would probably err on the side that it's not true. But there is something special about Enoch, and if the book of Enoch is true, then obviously we have an account of it. I don't think it's true. But anyway, I think that the book of Enoch was written based on that verse, based on the knowledge that Enoch did something quite different than all the other guys. He walked with God, so he was more faithful to God. And I believe that that's why he was called out special. But anyway, an important part of my note here is that anything surrounding these more controversial topics like the book of Enoch, we have to consider this important phrase that I coined. Is it revelation or is it speculation? Around this book of the Bible, it's probably fraudulent, most likely, I'd say. So anything surrounding Enoch is speculation. There's nothing wrong with speculation, but we should not teach any speculation dogmatically. So if we speculate on something, like surrounding Enoch, then we are allowed to look into it and research it and learn about it, and we could, have a conversation with someone about it, but we shouldn't teach it to a church, say. All of this surrounding the book of Enoch is speculation because the book of Enoch is fraudulent. The book of Enoch does not have credible proof that it is what it claims to be, I suppose. So there's no credible proof that the book of Enoch is what it claims to be. So anything surrounding Enoch is speculatory. So anyway, all that to say, there's a difference between revelation and speculation. The book of Enoch is fraudulent, so anything surrounding Enoch is speculation, but the Bible singles him out as special, so there is something special about Enoch, but we just don't know what it is. It's speculation, not revelation. Anyway, back to the text. Methuselah's descendants. And Methuselah lived 107 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Lamech's descendants. And Lamech lived 182 years, and he begat a son. And he called the name of his son Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because the ground which the Lord hath cursed, And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Noah's descendants. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Man's wickedness. This is Genesis chapter 6, if you're following. And it came to pass, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, and that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them, wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God said that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only continually evil. And it repented the Lord that he made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. So I put a note here. God gave man free will, and hoped that man would use it to worship and praise him. So God had hope in man's ability to choose the right thing, and yet we didn't. We chose sin, and we only thought about evil, and we only came toward evil continually. We came back toward evil over and over and over and over again. And God seemed to regret. So it says, God repenteth that he created man. So what does that mean? Does that mean God's not omniscient? Does that mean God feels bad for what he did? God feels like he did something wrong? No. God doesn't feel that he did something wrong. God sees that man did something wrong. God sees that he created us so that we could worship him and that we could have a relationship with God, and yet man went astray from God. And so God, I suppose you could say, took a bet, took a gamble. And on one end, God could have gotten two people, Adam and Eve, who were faithful to God eternally, and he could have had a relationship with these two people as creator and creation, and this would have been good eternally, forever. But on the other hand, these two people, Adam and Eve, could have sinned. They could have gone astray. They could have eaten the fruit, the forbidden fruit, and betrayed God. And that's what they did. And so God remained faithful to humanity by giving us grace. So the reason why it says that God repenteth that he created man is not because God made a mistake, it's because man made a mistake. And so God, I suppose God is angry with man. God is upset that man has done this, has done all the things that we have. And so man could have either done evil things that he did. We did evil things. Man's wickedness. It came to pass when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. And the thoughts of his heart were wickedness continually. So we only just turned toward evil over and over and over again. We never did any good. I suppose that could be why Enoch was singled out. Maybe he didn't think continually of evil. Maybe he didn't do continually evil things. So anyway, God did not regret creating humanity. God was upset with what man had done with his gift of creation, of being created. And God being upset, again, gives us grace by not destroying completely humanity, but by giving us Noah, who created the ark, and who brought all the animals aboard the ark, and his family, and all that, so that he could keep humanity going, and so that we could all be alive today. If it wasn't for God telling Noah to do these things, and Noah being faithful, and having faith in God, that God would do these things, and not just ignoring him and not building the ark and all that, Noah had faith, and Noah did what God told him to do, and he was saved. And that's why we all have life today. So anyway, back to the text. Noah finds grace with God. Yeah, so just what I was talking about. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God, just like Enoch, notice. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted its way through the earth. And God said to Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them within the earth. Building the ark. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. And a window thou shalt make on the ark, and a cubit thou shalt finish it above, and the door of the ark that shalt thou set it in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. From under the heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. The promise of a covenant. But with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort, shalt thou bring unto the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. So I put a note here. God prophesies the covenant with both Abraham and all of mankind through Jesus. So what does that mean? God prophesies the covenant with Abraham. So this covenant God made with Abraham, the covenant is that God would give Abraham's generations ahead of him land in Canaan, and he promised to Abraham that Abraham would have many descendants, many sons, and many grandsons and great-grandsons, etc. So Abraham would be blessed with many future generations, and the future generations would be blessed with land. So anyway, this covenant says that God, with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come to the ark, thou and thy sons. So what it's saying here is I'm going to establish a covenant with you, Noah, but when it says that God will establish a covenant with Abraham, Abraham's covenant endured through generations. So what does that mean? When God says, I'll establish a covenant with you, really, he means I'll establish a covenant with your people, your family. So God establishes a covenant with Abraham, but the covenant was really with Israel, because the covenant is with all of Abraham's descendants. So the same thing applies to Noah, because God says to Noah, I'm going to establish a covenant with you. God never establishes a covenant with Noah, but God establishes a covenant with Abraham. So God is prophesying that he's going to establish a covenant with Abraham, which is one of Noah's descendants. So he's going to establish a covenant with Abraham at some point, and then if you go down the line, you can look at Jesus. Jesus is a descendant of David. David is a descendant of who? Abraham. So, if David is a descendant of Abraham, Jesus is a descendant of David, Jesus is a descendant of Abraham. So Jesus is part of this covenant, and he establishes a new covenant. So Jesus is both, since he's both man and God, and he's a Jew, ethnically, not religiously. Obviously, Jesus was the first Christian, I would argue. So obviously Jesus is a Jew, so he's part of the Abrahamic covenant, And he's also establishing a new covenant. He could not establish a new covenant if he wasn't a Jew. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. Right. So Noah, God promises a covenant to Noah. He's not promising the covenant to Noah. He's promising a covenant to Noah's descendants. So that just outlines that God's promises will endure through generations. We can see the same thing in Revelation, honestly. Revelation has not come yet. It was prophesied 2,000 years ago. And I'm sure that there's some people out there that might even lose their faith over when is Revelation coming? I don't know. It's taken so long. But look at here. God made Noah wait so long for a covenant. I don't know exactly how long it was between Noah and Abraham, but it would have been a long time, like almost as long as we've waited for Revelation to come. And then, of course, the even more important covenant, the covenant with Jesus, he had to wait like 5,000 years for that, which is much more than we've waited for Revelation. So, all that to say, God's promises endure, and all we have to do is wait. And sometimes it might not even be in our lifetime that God's promises are fulfilled. So, there you go. Anyway, back to the text. Verse 20. Of fowls after their kind, and cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of all the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee, and for them. And thus did Noah. According to all that God had commanded him, so did he. Chapter 7. Entering the ark. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou, and all thy house unto the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, and male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean 2 by 2, and male and his female. So, we see here, clean beasts. What does that mean? So I don't know, obviously, every single clean and unclean animal, but I know that, like, pigs are unclean because you're not allowed to eat pork because of kosher, and, like, shellfish and stuff. So God is saying to Noah to take 2 of every unclean animal and 7 of every clean animal. So why is that important? What does that even mean? Why does that matter? The cleanliness laws are actually very revealing of God's character. It's not just like, do this because I said so. First of all, there's actually, I didn't put this in my notes, but God is actually being faithful to his people because there's health benefits to eat the food that God told them to eat. So it's actually healthier to eat, like, no pork, because pork is, frankly, not very good for you. And shellfish, they're bottom feeders. They eat, like, stuff at the bottom of the ocean, like, including mercury, kind of like tuna. So, really, it's a graceful thing that God did to give them kosher, because they would not have done these things. It was good for them. It was healthier for them to do these things than to not. I didn't put that in my notes, but I just thought of that randomly. Anyway, so an animal can be clean, and yes, I remember this. So an animal can be clean and then become unclean, and then it can have a child. It can have, let's say it's a sheep. You have a sheep, it gets a little blood on it, and then it's unclean. Uh-oh, what do I do now? So this sheep can have a child with another sheep. It can have a baby, and this baby sheep, this new lamb, is going to be clean again. So even in these laws, we can see that God does not judge us based on our parents' sins. I think it's in one of the prophets. I want to say Jeremiah. I'd have to look that up, though. And so anyway, a child is not judged by his father's sins. So these cleanliness laws actually show that you can have a lamb without blemish. Like, think about Jesus. Jesus is our sacrifice. He's our lamb without blemish, the Passover lamb. And so Jesus died for the sins of the world, just like the Passover lamb was to be a lamb slaughtered as a sacrifice for our sins. Except a Passover lamb, it would be a clean lamb and not a lamb without blemish. So Jesus obviously was a lamb without blemish because he never sinned. And so he was the perfect sacrifice for all of creation, for all of humanity. And so Jesus was the Passover lamb. And if you look, one of Jesus' many names was son of David. He wasn't technically the son of David, but he was in the generations following David. David sinned. David, he sent Bathsheba's husband out to war so that he could have him killed and and he could sleep with Bathsheba. So that was very sinful of David to do. So David was not perfect. David was far from perfect. And yet Jesus, the lamb without blemish, came from David's lineage. And yet Jesus was still without blemish. So Jesus could be perfect even though he was in the genealogy of someone who was not perfect. So we can see that we're not judged by our parents' sins. That's just part of God's character. Just like we can see that Noah was favorable in the eyes of God, even though in the past his family, Adam and Eve, they sinned. They committed the original sin. So there you go. And anyway, the waters prevail. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went up upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven, and were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. Okay, so this is a point of speculation. Remember I was talking about earlier, revelation versus speculation. This is a point of speculation that I had, which is that the flood did not go up over the entire earth. Notice it never said the flood goes up over the whole earth. It just said that the flood comes up over the earth, so it could be above the ground. So I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion, which I will not speak on dogmatically because this is all speculation, this was just over either Africa or the Middle East, because we don't know exactly where. We just know that it was in that continent. It was on Africa, or it was on the Middle East, because those were the two areas where the people were roaming throughout that time. Like the Euphrates, I believe, was said to come from the Garden of Eden. So they would have been around the Euphrates. So probably more likely in Africa, even though most of the Bible takes place in the Middle East. Anyway, besides the point. So this is all speculation again. But what I believe is that the waters only went up over the continent, or even less than that, even just a part of the continent, and they went up over the Sahara Desert. So I came up with this article, and this is an article about whales. These are whale bones. A team led by Egyptian scientists have dug up 43-million-year-old fossil in the Sahara Desert. So, again, this is all speculation, but in my opinion, this is evidence of the flood. So, if this is all true, we have a whale with legs. So, I don't know, you can look through this article. I'll just scroll through it really quick. Authors study say it has unique features of the skull, mandibles that suggest a capacity for more than efficient oral and mechanical processing. It was a predator. It was a god of death, apparently. They named it the Phaeomycetus Anubis, which scientists name part after Anubis, the Egyptian god, whatever. Whales used to be herbivorous, deer-like terrestrial animals. Scientists write, over the span of 10 million years, they turn into carnivorous creatures. Anyway, and the four-legged creature is part of that evolution. So, yes, I do believe in evolution, but that's not really the point I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make here, the most important part, is a team led by Egyptian scientists have dug up a 43-million-year-old fossil in the Sahara Desert. The important part is that it's in the Sahara Desert. So, the Sahara Desert was either an ocean or there was a flood. A flood, like the flood that Noah lived through. So, I think that it's possible, again, speculation, not revelation, but I think that it's possible that this whale fossil got here through the flood. So that's just speculation, but I thought this was interesting, so I did a little research, and this is what I found. Anyway, back to the text. Chapter 7, verse 21. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl, and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and of every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. Every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. That is all I'm reading for today. That was verse 4 through 8. Verse 4 through 7, ending at verse 8. Chapter 8. So anyway, that was all Biblical Apologetics, episode 2. I hope you enjoyed. Check out my other videos, I guess, if you enjoyed. Like and subscribe. And I hope you have a good week. There you go. Jesus loves you. And have a good one, and goodbye.